If a patient came to you with fatigue and brain fog, anxiety, hormone issues, sleep problems, stubborn weight gain, all the things, what would you think? Well, you'd probably think thyroid, maybe adrenals, hormones, gut issues, maybe, and you'd probably be right. But what if it was something much easier than that? What if it was just blood sugar? Because when this is off, everything is off. What we're going to talk about today is the impact on glucose dysregulation on the body, how it shows up, and of course, how to fix it. Let's go. Welcome to the Clinical Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Rhonda, your no fluff, tell it like it is business bestie for wellness practitioners just like you who want to build a practice you love and make a bigger impact and a little money while you're at it. So if you're ready to ditch the overwhelm, attract your dream, ideal patients, and finally run your practice with complete confidence, you're in the right place. Each week, we're tackling things from programs to patient retention to marketing strategies that actually work, sprinkled, of course, with a little sass, a lot of heart, and the step-by-step strategies that will help you get there. So grab your cup of coffee, your notebook, or whatever keeps you going, and let's build a practice you love and a life you love together. Well, hello. Welcome back to the podcast. You know, as I was sitting down ready to record this podcast, I thought, sometimes I don't pay attention. Like I know what I want to talk about, and then I write up my notes and kind of make the points that I want to talk about. And I realized this is episode 298. That's like a pretty impressive, I have to say, 298 episodes. You guys are awesome. You just keep listening and keep loving it. And as always, I don't ever mention this, but do a girl a favor. Go like, review, rate, subscribe, all the things. It really does help the podcast get found so that it gets promoted out there elsewhere. But yeah, 298 episodes. So we're coming up on number 300. So exciting. We'll see what the future holds with podcasts. You know, you just never know. I might decide I'm going to do something different one day. But for now, here we are. And I've got a great episode for you today. We're going to talk about blood sugar. And you're all probably thinking, yeah. But listen, sometimes we just need to go back to the basics. And there might just be a few little tidbits in here that might kind of wake your brain up a little bit. And you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that. You know how it is. We kind of get in our rut and we just sort of keep seeing things through the same lens all the time. I'm so guilty of that. And then something will happen and something's not working. And I think, wait a minute, I kind of skipped over that part. So I would consider blood sugar one of the foundational aspects that we always need to be considering, because when we don't address blood sugar, it's sort of the foundation for everything else. And in part because it involves the adrenal glands. It involves obviously the pancreas. It also involves the liver. And then we've got cortisol. And then it can kind of start to be a little bit of a snowball. Managing their diet, making sure that the patient has enough steady glucose throughout the day. And for brain function, the brain needs 20% of the glucose, but it only makes up 2% of our total body weight. So by weight, it's the largest consumer of glucose in the body. So we've got to, in order for brain fog to work and mental clarity and acumen, we've got to make sure that blood sugar is stable. So when it's stable, mood is stable, energy is stable, all of those things. So here's kind of the cascade, right? We all know this, but just for review. So we eat something that's high in sugar or high in refined carbs. You're out and you're going to eat like bread, or you're going to have just some ice cream because it's a Friday night and it's summer and we're going to go have a little treat or whatever. Blood sugar goes up, insulin, the pancreas releases all the insulin, then the insulin brings the blood sugar down. And if we don't have anything to stabilize it, then blood sugar goes too low because it's a short carbohydrate, right? It's going to burn up fast. Now blood sugar crashes. Now the adrenals get the 911 that say, oh my gosh, what's happening? We're crashing. What's happening? And then the cortisol kicks in, and then that raises blood sugar back up because it talks to the liver. The liver releases glycogen, too many G words in there, but we end up, or we start snacking again, right? We get the craving like, oh my gosh, I need to have something else. And then we reach for another refined carbohydrate and the cycle just keeps going. So the adrenals are working overtime. We have high levels of cortisol. The pancreas is working overtime, and the patient, the patient, we don't feel good because our blood sugar is so wonky. So if it's the foundation of everything, let's talk about what the symptoms are for patients that have where you can suspect that blood sugar is an issue. So So how it shows up in the body, there are a variety of ways, and these were the ones that I kind of made note of. And there's probably more, but these are kind of I would call these a low-hanging fruit. I talk about that all the time. The first one is just energy crashes. If they're going along fine, and all of a sudden, boom, or they need to eat every 2 to 3 hours, or even, after you eat 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours after they eat, that reactive hypoglycemia kicks in. You get Yawning is a big sign. I didn't even put that in my notes. I just thought of it. If someone eats and then they start yawning. Why are you yawning? You have a full belly and you didn't eat too much, but you're yawning. You're yawning because we have unstable blood sugar. So obviously the signs of like shaky irritability, hangry, those are all looped into the same thing. But really our energy just starts to tank. The second one is cravings. So when glucose starts to get low, of course, a very well-balanced body is going to send a signal that says, I need fuel. And when blood sugar is in I think about it like kind of a crisis state. In other words, it's kind of starting to precipitously drop and the adrenals are getting involved like, oh my gosh, 911, we need some help over here. What do we reach for? We're not wired to think, oh, I better stop and make myself some meatloaf. Said no one ever, because we need fuel right now. And so what often happens is even a healthy patient will reach for an apple, let's say. Okay, well, yes, the apple has fiber. Fiber is going to prolong that life of glucose in the bloodstream, but it's still pretty high in sugar. Not that I'm not opposed to it. I'm not opposed. But what if it was an apple with some almond butter? At least now we have some substance with it. We're going to support We're going to address the craving, but we're also going to stabilize that blood sugar. Like if someone reaches for crackers, I've done that. I've reached for blue corn tortilla chips or something like that. And I just will sit and eat those. And I think, okay, why don't I have some cheese with this or some salsa with this? Or why don't I grab some chicken and have some chicken with this and make myself some nachos or something? If I'm just want some kind of fast kind of comfort food. I don't want to stop. If I'm hungry, I don't want to stop and have to get the tortillas and grate the cheese and then get the chicken and cut it up and put it on there, put it in the oven, wait for the cheese. No, I'm going to just reach for something fast. And everyone else does the same thing. We all kind of do that. So cravings, sugar cravings, sweet cravings, if they tend to be needing to eat all the time and they're not making good choices, that's a sign of unstable or unregulated, dysregulated blood sugar. I already mentioned hangry. I kind of wrote that down here, but just can't think straight. Like I need food and I need it right now. That's kind of a 911 blood sugar issue. Also, waking up at night between 2 and 4. This is a big one because blood sugar does drop in the middle of the night. Now, when it drops in the middle of the night, the adrenal glands pick up the signal. They release cortisol. Cortisol spikes up to compensate. But when cortisol spikes up to compensate, what happens? We wake up and then we can't fall back asleep. So if it's between 2 and 4, you can kind of suspect that there may be some blood sugar going on. And it might just be as easy as getting them to eat. I always say a protein, a fat, and a fruit or a veggie before bed. And my secret hack is adding a little bit of AF beta food. So I know if you're listening and you're a standard process hater, fine, you can still do you, but I have just found this trick to work. A little bit of AF beta food, couple 2 or 3, because what the AF beta food does is it takes the food that you have in your mouth, in your stomach, it promotes the storage of glycogen. And we should have about 2 days worth of stored glycogen in the liver. AF beta food helps to promote that storage. And so it shuttles the glucose from the protein, the fat, and the fruit or veggie that we just ate, and it just shuttles it right into the liver, and then the liver stores it. So then, see what happens? This is magical. In the middle of the night, when blood sugar naturally drops, the adrenal goes, hey, problem, talks to the liver, and the liver says, I got this, no big deal. It releases a little bit of that glycogen into the bloodstream. Blood sugar is very happy, it stays stable, and you don't wake up. So nighttime wakening, think liver and think cortisol. If the adrenal glands are tired or dysregulated themselves and they can't produce the cortisol, that's often when we can't go back to sleep or when we do wake up, right? It's just too much of a kind of a response in the middle of the night. So think liver and adrenals as well. We often think, oh, well, I'll just give some glucose sugar balance from doctor's research, or I'll do Diaplex or whatever you're going to use. And that's great, but you have to address the adrenals, and we probably need to make sure that we've got enough glycogen in the liver. All right, next one, anxiety that doesn't make sense. And here's what I mean about that. Sometimes you will be doing what you know to treat anxiety, to support an anxiety type response, right? Maybe it's a Gaia product, or maybe it's whatever you're using. And they say, well, I'm better, but I still am anxious. That's classic for blood sugar right there. The symptoms look similar. If blood sugar drops on a consistent basis and the adrenal glands are dysregulated, that HPA axis is off, the symptoms can mimic anxiety when really it's blood sugar. It's that, I feel unsettled, maybe fears of like dread or shakiness, or, a person could translate that as being, I'm anxious, but it's not psychological, it's metabolic. So if you have someone that has anxiety, I'm not saying in every case, but just keep that on your radar, because you might find that if you manage blood sugar, what if the anxiety symptoms that the patient is interpreting as anxiety, what if 50% of those symptoms go away and now really you just have very mild anxiety that will be handled with like ashwagandha or something. So just kind of keep that on your radar. Another symptom is brain fog. That's pretty obvious because again, that brain consumes so much of that glucose. If there's not enough glucose for the brain to work, it gets foggy. It's not clear. It's cobwebby. It's like, I can't remember. I can't think. I can't form my words. I can't focus on things because blood sugar is low. Another one that's big, in fact, we just talked about this in a live Q&A inside Clinical Academy just a few weeks ago. In fact, we talked about this and we had a big, long conversation about stubborn weight loss, like women who cannot get the weight off. It is so many times their blood sugar. Now, that doesn't mean that there's, again, not adrenal involvement, and maybe there's some liver there, and maybe they need to really increase protein. Protein is like putting gas on the metabolic fire, and you get protein in someone, you got to make sure their upper digestion's working, of course. We don't want to throw protein into a stomach of a person who's been a vegetarian forever, that their little parietal cells are not going to keep up very quickly. Sometimes you have to warm up the engine a bit. But when you get that blood sugar stable and you get high protein in there, or the right kind of protein, I should say, the correct protein in there, very often the metabolism starts to pick up and speed up, and that weight will drop right off. But remember that insulin and cortisol, we've already established that, those are both fat storage hormones. And so you can eat, and they can eat a good diet, but if we have too much insulin or we have too much cortisol, the fat is going to stay on. The patient's not going to be able to get it off. So we have to balance the blood sugar, get those HPA working, and then maybe look at like protein in the diet. And then the last thing that I jotted down, was just hormonal issues. Again, estrogen is also a fat storage hormone. And when we have unstable blood sugar in women, it drives cortisol, which we've talked about. That steals progesterone, inflammation goes up, estrogen metabolism is disrupted, and then thyroid conversion suffers. When you know that blood sugar is causing, when there's hormonal issues in women, you're thinking it's hormonal, and it may very well be. But what if it's blood sugar? Because the blood sugar instability, so we have blood sugar that's up and down, up and down, up and down. Then we have cortisol, up and down, up and down, up and down. The cortisol, when we have that high cortisol, we have that pregnenolone steal. Remember, the pregnenolone is going to drop down that cortisol pathway for cortisol at the expense of the sex hormones. Inflammation is going to go up. Estrogen metabolism is going to drop. It's going to change. And then that affects thyroid hormone conversion. It's kind of a little bit, it's just a little bit more complicated. We have the pancreas, we have the adrenals, we have the sex hormones, and we have the thyroid. Blood sugar that mimics itself as hormones can be all of those things. It can be hormone and blood sugar. So what are we going to look for in a lab? Let's just talk about the testing. You all know fasting glucose. The lab range is up to 100, I like to see it about 85 is my kind of sweet spot. And I'm not saying that someone has a 92 glucose, they're not pre-diabetic necessarily, but if it's over 90, I'm kind of like with a dog. The ear goes, eh? I'm just thinking, keep an eye on that. Let's not let that get any higher, because what you'll notice if you look at labs over time, a lot of times that glucose just starts to slowly increase. It goes from 92 to 94 to 95 to 97. Well, at what point are we going to call this a problem? It's going the wrong way. If it's going from 92 to 89 to 87, I'm really happy with that. That's a well-regulated glucose. So just watch. Fasting glucose can also be normal even when they have stable blood sugar because remember, blood is just a snapshot. It's not a movie. We're not getting the whole day. So maybe that fasting first morning glucose just happens to be fine, but they're not fine. So you got to look at some other clues. Another one is the A1C. You all know this. It's a 90-day average of basically the stickiness of the blood cells. But if I pour sugar in that water, the sugar becomes sticky, makes the water sticky. And now whatever I've put in the water, they're going to start to kind of stick together. Can get like a sugary film or a coating on the top of it. And they're going to not bounce and slide around like they used to. They're going to stick together. And that's what the A1C tells you is how sticky, how much glucose is there in the water, the plasma, the blood fluid, how much stickiness is there that's causing those red blood cells to stack up on one another and get sticky. That's what the A1C measures. So we really want to see it like down close to 5.0, 5.2. That's kind of I'm okay with 5.5, but 5.5, I like to see it under that a little bit if possible. And then there's also fasting insulin. I think the lab tests that I use from professional co-op services, which I love them, it doesn't automatically come with a fasting insulin, but sometimes I don't feel like I need to test it. I don't need to test it every time, but I will often add it because this is the one that it's really valuable. And I'm going to give you a calculation here in a minute. So if you're not ordering fasting insulin, you really should, because you can have on a blood test, you can have normal glucose with an elevated insulin. And what that means is that the body is working overtime and the pancreas is working harder to try and keep glucose within a normal range. And it's really a sign that insulin resistance is sort of developing. It's kind of starting to come along, coming to the party, but it hasn't quite showed up yet. So always, if you suspect, if there's any of those things going on, brain fog, fatigue, afternoon crashes, all the things that we talked about earlier, make sure that you're putting a fasting insulin on. Now, there's a calculated marker called the HOMA IR, and the HOMA IR stands for Homeostatic Model Assessment of Insulin Resistance. So now you know why we say HOMA IR. And it's just a calculated value, and all it does is use glucose and fasting insulin. Super easy. So if you're somewhere where you can write this down, write it down. Otherwise, you can look it up online if you want. But it's just really simple. In the US, MAR glucose and fasting, our glucose is measured in milligrams per deciliter. So if that's what it is, which it would be here, all it is fasting insulin times glucose. So you just take those two numbers. What is the fasting insulin number? What is the glucose, fasting glucose? Doesn't calculate this if they have their test taken in the middle of the day. It has to be fasting in the morning. So it's fasting insulin times fasting glucose, and you divide that by 405. That's it. And that gives you the number, okay? And we want that number to be pretty dang low. Now, if it's in millimoles, then you're going to divide by 22.5, but you probably don't need to remember that. You just need to remember the 405. The last one is the triglycerides and HDL. When you see high triglycerides and low HDL, that is metabolic dysfunction. And some of the lab tests will come back with a ratio. It'll say like the ratio should be, a triglyceride to HDL ratio, but not all the tests come back. If it does have a ratio, it should be under 2, but you could just generally look at it. If triglycerides are high and you see that HDL is low, you know there's a metabolic problem. That's just a good sign. So That's how you can test it, okay? So what are you going to do? Well, the first thing I would do is after you've tested, you've decided that there's some kind of dysregulation in the glucose handling system, the first thing that I would do is I would use some kind of supplemental support. My favorite at the moment, the one that I've been using a lot of, is glucose sugar balance from Doctor's Research. And I like it because it's got the gymnema in it. So I don't have to give more than one thing. It's got chromium in it, which the pancreas needs. It works good, and it seems to get blood sugar stabilized pretty quickly. So I dose it at 2 twice a day. That's kind of my dose. I think the recommended dose is 3, but 3 is just hard to manage. I'm like, just do 4 and you're fine. So I do 2 twice a day. The second thing I'm going to do is make sure that they have enough protein in the meal, because that protein is going to stabilize any carbs. It's going to slow glucose absorption and maintain that steady blood sugar. It's when we eat just an apple, right? Or just some cookies because we're hungry or got the munchies or whatever. I would rather someone eat 2 handfuls of cashews than to go grab just some crackers or something. So part of it is preparation. You just have to think ahead. Over the weekend, you got to cook your protein for the week. It's a hassle, but we just have to do it. So they have to do the same thing. thing. So you want to make sure that there's protein at every meal. A palm-sized portion of protein is a pretty good, indicator. Breakfast is a good one. Some people are fasting, they'll do like some intermittent fasting, and that's fine. So whenever the first meal of the day is, make sure that there's protein there. But I was just recently talking to someone who, she is a type 1 diabetic. She's been type 1 for 20 some years. And she said that all of her type 1 diabetes specialists and doctors that are managing her insulin and all the things, they tell her that a perfect breakfast in the morning is oats. And so every morning she has oatmeal for breakfast. I about fell out of my chair. I said, really? And she said, yeah, I just eat oats and I feel fine. And I said, yeah, how much insulin are you using? And she goes, well, I usually use quite a bit in the morning and then it kind of peters off during the day. And I said, well, what do you eat the rest of the day? Oh, well, then I'll eat some, maybe some chicken a little bit later, tuna or, something like that. I go, yeah. And you don't need as much insulin, right? Well, yeah. I said, because oats is what we feed horses. Was not meant to be human food. This is a no. We don't want to do that. So this was a little bit of a brain bender. She said, I literally have been told this since I was a little girl that oatmeal was good for breakfast for a type 1 diabetic. No, we got to get protein in here. So no breakfast cereal, no Pop-Tarts, none of that. We need to make sure that they got some good protein. No naked carbs. I always tell them no carbs by themselves. So if you're going to eat an apple, add some butter to it. If you're going to have crackers, put some cheese with it. If you're going to eat out and there's bread and you just can't help yourself, make sure you have a ton of olive oil with that bread, just so that you can slow down that glucose. And then another tip that I always tell people is just make sure you're eating on a regular schedule. Try not to snack. Eat well enough that you've got some satiety and then you're not tempted to snack. It's when we start the snacking train that then we snack and we snack and we snack and we snack. And that creates a whole nother cascade, not only disruption in blood sugar, but we disrupt the MMC wave. We get sleepy earlier. There's going to be more nighttime wakening. The liver doesn't have a chance to store the glycogen. There's a lot of things that happen when we're snacky. So you want to just teach the patient how to eat until you're satisfied, not stuff, and then wait at least 3 hours before eating again. And you're going to have to make sure there's enough protein and fat in the meal so that satiety can happen. And then intermittent fasting, some people do it and they really like it. They're happy. They feel good when they intermittent fast. I'm okay with that as long as it's not intermittent fasting where you're only eating during a 3-hour window during the day. Because that right there, when that pancreas doesn't have a chance to exert its muscle, right? We're not putting pressure on it. We basically aren't stressing the system. We're not stressing the system with food. When we stress the system with food, a good food like protein, fat, fruit, veggie, etc. We have all those things together in a meal. When we're not giving the body the ability to kind of work, right? It's supposed to do its job. We don't want to starve it. And I've seen a number of people who will just say, oh, well, I'm fine. I just eat once a day. They'll lose a whole bunch of weight. They'll pack a bazillion calories in that 1 or 2 or 3 hour period. And then they don't eat again until that same period the next day. What happens is as soon as they go back to start eating like they want to eat normal again, they'll lose weight doing it the first way. And then they end up putting all that weight back on. So I think fasting is a bit trendy to some degree. It was kind of all the rage and everything. But for someone that has dysregulated blood sugar, I'm not sure that intermittent fasting is the best recommendation that you could make. I think for some women, women especially, I think intermittent fasting can actually make things worse. And I think that has to do with our sex hormones. So if you have a woman who's got stubborn weight gain, maybe don't think about intermittent fasting. Maybe just think about getting her to eat protein regularly throughout the day and none of this like restricting, because the body's going to think of it as restricted calories. So I want you to think about how can you stabilize her blood sugar throughout the day so that we have zero chance that she's going to be up and down and up and down. Those blood sugar bombs that she might be eating, she's grabbing quick bites of cereal from her toddler's tray, or she's, eating a donut or a scone or something like that. Avoid all of that. Make sure that I always say, if something goes in your mouth, there better be protein with it. If you're eating a piece of cheese, there had better be some turkey behind it, because you can't just eat one thing and not have some proteins. Protein's super important. And then of course, movement. You all know how that is. That just helps to burn that glucose that's in the bloodstream. Even if it's just a short 10-minute walk, it's great. Like after a meal, just go walk in your house, walk outside, get on a treadmill, whatever you have to do, just enough to get some movement, get those muscles moving so that those muscles can use up some of that glucose. So, other things you could consider would be alpha lipoic acid. Berberine is great for blood sugars, cinnamon. I add cinnamon to my smoothies every day when I make them. There's a lot of different supplements out there that you can use. My favorite favorite is glucose sugar balance from Doctor's Research. That's the one that I really love. So, all right, now, how are we going to wrap this thing up? I think I would say don't underestimate the impact of glucose when you have patients that come in with symptoms that you otherwise might attribute to thyroid or adrenals or poor sleep or high stress. Sometimes we're so quick. This is kind of how I started this episode is we think, well, of course it's that. We just we have blinders on and we think this is the problem. I'm going to go down this road. This is the exact problem. I'm going to treat this like an adrenal case. And it's not an adrenal case at all. It's a blood sugar case. It's a blood sugar dysregulation. And so then we go marching down the road. We give the adaptogens, RoNe&x, whatever it is that we're using for the adrenal glands, but they're not getting a lot better. They're complaining. I don't feel it's maybe 20% better because it's blood sugar. So don't neglect the blood sugar. You can't just work on the adrenals. You can't just work on the thyroid. You can't just work on the sex hormones. We've got to figure out how to factor in blood sugar. And even if there's like anxiety, like I talked about, it could be blood sugar. So if you're wondering, like, how am I going to put all this together? I do have a free resource for you. It's called the 5 Clinical Non-Negotiables. These are the 5 things that I look at with every single patient. Every single patient, every single time in my mind, I go through the list of 5 things and I think, okay, check. Have I done that? Yes. Is that good? Yes. Is this okay? Yes. Is this okay? And there's 5 things and you can go download it. It's free for you. Go to RoNe&x.com/non-negotiables. Non-negotiables. That's where you'll find it. So 5, just type in non-negotiables, all one word, RoNe&x.com/non-negotiables. You'll find it. You can download it and then use it as a checklist. It kind of describes each one. Obviously, blood sugar is one, adrenals are one, liver is another one. So there's all my top 5. And I think it will help you because it'll give you just a reminder, if nothing else, where you think, okay, if you don't know where to start, you don't know what to do. I don't know where to start. And I hear this all the time for like the Doctors in Clinical Academy. That's why they're there, because they say, I don't know what to do. Like I've got a patient sitting in front of me. I have all this head knowledge and I don't know why. I don't know where to start. Where do I start? Well, this is right here. This is it. 5 non-negotiables. That's it. You're just going to start with the non-negotiables. It buys you time. It gets the foundational aspects kind of fixed, right? You're addressing blood sugar. You're addressing adrenals. You're addressing the liver. You're getting all the foundational stuff fixed. And a lot of times, if you fix their diet, you fix their blood sugar, you get their cortisol back online, give them a little bit of liver support. If you're going to do a detoxification or something like that, great. You do those things. I've always said lots of times they're going to be 50, 60, 70% better. And you never had to go down chase some symptom because you started by making sure that the foundation was right. So I've just always kind of thought that way. And sometimes I get out in front of my ski tips and I forget, and then it bites me in the butt and then I have to come back and I go, oh shoot, I did forget that part. So then I have to explain the patient. We have to go back and kind of do a basic thing and then it just fixes and it's all better. So go grab the free resource, RoNe&x.com/non-negotiables. And if you'd like to join me in Clinical Academy, I'd love to have you. It really is it's the how for the what you know. So when you have all the clinical knowledge in the world and you want to know how to actually implement it with patients, that's where it is. Clinical Academy, RoNe&x.com/Clinical Academy. Thanks, friends, for hanging out with me this week. I'll see you next week on the podcast.